All right. I've been super excited for a while to record this. Avery Carl, for the folks that don't know her, was our number one agent in the world in 2022 and 2023. And we'll come back. Might take a small break in 2024, but most likely we'll come back as number one in 2025 or 2026. And Avery, what I love about doing this is once seeing someone's finished product is one thing. So I actually want to spend more time on the come up and the 0 to 1 process because especially like being the number one agent in the world for us, I think a lot of people get like I can never do that. So I like to spend as much time on the 0 to 1 getting started. But again, I brag about you all the time. It's just even more fun if I get to hear it from you. So just take us back to how you ended up in this crazy industry. And again, I do want to spend a lot of time talking about your niche and your specialization because from the beginning, I've been in the industry. I've always said the riches are in the niches, and you're probably one of the best examples on the planet that I know of. So,
well, thank you. So I got into real estate by accident. I did not, as a little girl, say, "Oh, I want to be a real estate agent when I grow up." I don't think anybody says that. And it was because I had what I thought was my dream job working on the marketing side of the music business in Nashville. I'm an ex-touring musician. I was a guitar player in a bunch of sloppy punk rock bands that nobody's ever heard of. But anyway, I went back to school, got my master's degree, and started working in the music business and hated it. After about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, realized I'm really not a good employee. And my husband and I had just gotten married, and we had like a little bit of cash, like $10,000. And I was super into personal finance back then. I read I'm still into personal finance. I was super into Dave Ramsey back then, which I no longer am. But I read all his books, and I'm like, well, what can we do with this extra money that we have? And let's invest it. So we went to an Edward Jones, a financial planning office that was in the same building as my corporate job. We went in there, and the financial planner told us we did not have enough money for her to deal with. So we were like, okay, well, we're losers, I guess. So let's just go to the bar then. So we went to the bar, and while we're sitting there having a drink, we're like, well, when we moved to Nashville, we just moved to Nashville about 2 years earlier, and we bought a house. We moved from New York City, and this was back when Nashville was still cheap, back in 2012, 13. And our realtor was really trying to get us to buy in this super hip, like fast appreciating part of Nashville. And we said, no, thanks. We want to go out in the country. We're moving from Brooklyn to Tennessee. We are done with neighbors. So we bought a house out in the country, but we started thinking about the appreciation thing that she had mentioned when she was helping us buy. And we said, well, maybe there's something to that, because back then you could get a rental house in Nashville for $150,000. And we thought, well, if we save a little bit more money and we buy one of those houses, then we can put a tenant in it, and they're going to be paying the mortgage, and they're going to be paying the utilities. And then in 25 years, when our future kids need to go to college, we can just sell that house and pay for it out of our appreciation rather than out of our own income. And that'll be great. We'll be these great financial geniuses. So we went and bought a house, having no idea it was even called real estate investing. And it actually worked out really well. The mortgage on it was $647 a month. And we were able to rent it out for $1,500 a month. So we were making almost $1,000 a month on this over the mortgage, which coincidentally, which for those of you who don't know, the music business pays nothing because it's sexy, and there's always an intern who will do your job for free, and they make sure that you know that. So they're like, here it is, $37,000 a year. You want to work in the music business or not? And so I took that. But after all my deductions on my paycheck, that was about what I was making a month. It was like $1,000 a month. So we were like, this house is making the same amount of money that I'm making busting my ass in traffic an hour each way for a boss who hates me and a job I hate. So we said, well, we need more of these. We can build a business out of this. So then we started educating ourselves on real estate investing, and there weren't really any podcasts. There were no gurus or no Instagram personalities back then on investing in real estate. And we started buying short-term rentals, cabins in the Smokies, so vacation rentals, and we can get to that in a minute. But the reason I got licensed was because I am a Southerner. And for those who were not raised in the South, our manners are verbally beaten into us growing up. And so I'm very like, we don't offend anyone in any way. You are not direct. And my husband is very much a New Yorker. And he was embarrassing me, basically. I got my license because my husband was embarrassing me. And I was tired of apologizing to agents for his abrasive New York way. So I got my license and to start doing our own deals. And it all kind of went from there. So that was step one. Was I started down my career path because my husband was being embarrassing.
So I feel like that's the classic entrepreneurial fit, like in the E-Myth Revisited, right? So you just say, okay, let me just try this, and from the first one, like, how did it escalate to 956 closed transactions in 2023?
Yeah. So, well, it really started from our own real estate investing and our own success there. So the reason we bought a vacation rental in the Smokies was because after we bought that first long-term rental in Nashville, we said, okay, well, what can we buy that's going to make us the most amount of money the fastest so that we can then go buy more? And we landed on short-term rentals. Again, this is well before the boom. This was in 2015. We bought our first short-term rental. But we knew we didn't want to do it in Nashville because they were already very anti-short-term rental, and we could not afford to buy something and be told a couple years later, you can't do this anymore. So we had just been on vacation to the Gatlinburg, Smoky Mountain area of Tennessee, so like 4 hours east of Nashville. And we'd stayed in a rental cabin. All our friends that went with us stayed in rental cabins. And so we figured somebody owns these rental cabins. Why can't it be us? And again, there was no coaching back then. There's no YouTube on this. And we just kind of figured out how to manage them ourselves remotely from Nashville. And so my first transaction was just a friend of ours who said, you're making how much money on this cabin in the Smokies? Help me buy one. Teach me how to do it. And then it became a few more friends and then friends of friends. And then it became true clients that I had never met before. And all of a sudden I was the top selling agent in the Smokies. And I didn't even know how to even check the MLS to see who was producing the most. But it was me. And it's a lot of agents back then would say things like, well, why do you drive out? I drove my ass out there 4 hours, twice, sometimes 3 times a week to do showings and to take videos. And I did what other agents weren't willing to do in order to get there, and then scaled. I mean, I'll let you ask the questions, but I noticed that a lot of our clients, when they would buy something with us in the Smokies and it would do really well, they wanted to have properties in other types of markets. They want a beach house. Right. So I had several clients who would call me and say, hey, is there like a U in Destin, Florida that you know that you can send me to? And after the 4th or 5th person who asked me that, I said, well, let's put a me there. Let's put a me in Destin. They can come to one place, ask all their questions, and then we have an experienced agent who understands vacation rentals in that market. And then we grew to 20 markets over the course of 4 or 5 years that way.
So walk me through the progression, right? So in my experience, there's phase one, which is like 0 to call it almost 20 million, right? And that's like almost bumping your head against the wall. Mm-hmm. Or 50 million, there's that kind of ceiling. Mm-hmm. And again, this is just my experience watching top performers. And I was no exception either. It was like the first 5-6 years, it was like, hey, I'm doing really good. And then there's an unlock. And then you double and double and double. So like, mm-hmm. just for context, year one is a couple transactions. Year two is what? You talk me through like what were the big kind of steps in unit count?
So I think my very first year, well, it wasn't a whole year. I did maybe 10 deals. And then the next year I did 70 deals. And it just came from leaning into where the clients were coming to me the easiest. So when we would make one successful investor, they then buy multiple. So that's a big part of being successful with investors. They typically, if you can figure out how to talk to them and what they're looking for, they buy more than one property. And then they know other investors and they send their friends to you. So our business is still at this point 90% not necessarily 90% repeat, but 90% word of mouth and not lead sources. So it really just in being able to talk to them as an investor, because I had 3 or 4 of my own at that point. And then I continued scaling that over our portfolio over the course of the years. And now we have 250 properties. They're not all short-term rentals, 8 of them are, but just being able to talk to them from the standpoint of, yes, I do this too. Here's how you do this. It just kind of took off organically, but it didn't really take off until I started hiring people to work for me. And I really, really did not want to start a team. I never wanted to be a team leader. I was on a Keller Williams team when I started for all of 2 weeks, and I hated it. And I left Keller Williams over the way that breakup went. And I told myself as I started getting busier that I would never have a team. Teams are stupid. That was horrible. I had to make a bunch of cold calls to people who did not want to be called. They just clicked on a link on a website and they weren't looking to be talked to. They were just trying to get more information about a house. And I remember sitting there and being like, I did not quit my corporate job so I could sit here for you and call a bunch of people who don't want to be called. This is dumb. And so anyway, 2 weeks later, I was out. And when I started hiring people and realized like, okay, I can't do all of this by myself. And it was when I was pregnant with my first kid that it really became clear, okay, it's time to hire people. I knew I didn't want to run my team like that. I wanted my agents to be excited to work with me and to like working for me. And so I made sure that they were really busy and that they were making a lot of money. And it was when I started hiring agents and like kind of letting go a little bit, because at first I felt like I had to do everything and I wouldn't let them do anything because I was being a little bit of a control freak. And also the very first person that I hired to help me did try to completely rip me off and take all my clients. So I learned that lesson early, which is good. That was the best time to learn it. Best to learn it when you don't have much to take. And so when I started hiring agents, it took off. And then also when I myself got out of production. So I started hiring agents in 2018, started adding markets in 2019. And then at the end of 2020 is when I got out of production myself. And that was when it really took off. When I stepped out, like exactly like eMyth, when I stopped making the pies myself and started running the pie business really grew.
I describe your business as a hub and spoke model, right? You have an HQ and you don't replicate everything in every market. You're in bespoke markets based on kind of lead flow and demand from your funnels. Talk to us about that, because again, one of the things I say behind your back is you're probably the best example of expansion, not for the sake of expansion, right? Because of the opportunity presented itself. I think there's other thought process on expansion. I think a lot of people attempt to expand, but there was either with traditional marketing, it was probably easier to just go deeper in their own market or maybe one county over versus what you do, which is very niche down. So talk to us about that, because I try to talk people out of expansion, but the way you do it, I actually use as the example of how to properly use expansion.
Yes. So in terms of expansion, if we have more than 3 clients, back to another book called Upstream, if we have more than 3 clients who come to me and say, hey, do you have an agent in this market? Then it's time to start looking for an agent in that market. Because if 3 people have come to me and asked for it, how many people would like that but didn't come and say anything to me? So any market that we've opened in has either been A, driven by what the clients have asked for, or B, like the Smokies, which was our first market, and then Destin, Florida, they appreciated really, really crazy, like quadrupled in price over COVID. So we opened some cheaper markets. So like Myrtle Beach, where you can get, it might cost $500,000 to get a condo in Destin. Well, it costs $250 to get something similar in Myrtle Beach. So we started opening in cheaper markets, cheaper vacation markets, to accommodate our existing clientele everything is done to accommodate our existing clientele, whether it's preference where they want to own something, where they want to buy something, or if we're starting to run into price ceilings in some of our markets for a lot of people, then we'll open up in a comparable but something cheaper market.
And your thought process operationally, is it everything's processed out of HQ? How do you support your team members? Because again, one of the really interesting things about your model, I don't think all teams are teams, right? I feel like some teams are more like gang affiliation or social clubs, right? To me, a team is lead gen based first with accountability systems second, right? Like I tell people, there's no need to hire anybody until you have enough leads that you're putting some in the trash. And again, forget real estate. Like we could talk about any business, right? Like lead flow, and you go from self-employed to business owner. And then having the systems and process because I would venture and say that for a lot of folks, they probably would make more money and have more balance and have a better life by being on a team than being a solo agent who's got to do it all, especially if they align with someone who has an operation like yours that can fully support and kind of process and truly add value. So how do you work through that part of it? Because again, I've seen folks expand and kind of replicate HQ everywhere else and not get the efficiencies of the scaling possibilities that are there.
Yeah, so everything runs through HQ for us. Everything is done exactly the same with modifications based on states in terms of operations. The only, like, what I need my agents to do and what my agents do is to be experts in their market in terms of locations and what is the best opportunity for investment and what isn't. And really, we handle everything else. It's their job to find the best properties and get their clients through the contract and kind of hold their hands, and everything else we take care of. So we have transaction coordinators, we have back end education for our clients on how to self-manage, because our agents will get the same questions over and over again, like, how do I find a cleaner? How do I do all that? We handle all of that with the client personally. So it's just the agent's job to be an expert on location, property type, property size in their specific market, and everything else is run through HQ.
And you said 3 or more asks. Have you shrunk? Like, when people think of the word scale, it almost always goes this way versus it's an accordion. You can shrink it down as you have capacity. You can expand it as you have more demand. How do you think through the scalability up or down? Because the doubling of interest rates probably hit your business model even a little harder than the average agent.
Yes. So it definitely did, because our clients buy based on cash flow. And if the interest rates make the mortgage payment so much higher that it doesn't make sense to buy it anymore because it shrinks the cash flow too much, then they're not buying. I would say on that subject, 80% of the people who bought with us this year were past clients, and probably even a bit higher percentage of the people who bought with us who maybe aren't our past clients, but are already vacation rental owners in maybe other markets that we don't work in. So it should tell you something. And I mean, if you're listening and you're an investor, that now's a really good time to buy while there's not a lot of competition. But you asked me about scaling. So I like for my agents to be very busy. I like for my agents to be very productive and to make a lot of money. I know a lot of team leads, they don't want any one agent to be doing too many deals, because then if that agent leaves, then it puts too much of a dent in the business. But I operate from I want my agents to like working for me. And a lot of times, by keeping them busy, you are keeping them from looking around at other things and maybe wanting to leave and go try it on their own. But I like to hand them so many good leads that why would they ever go anywhere else? So we definitely, in terms of agent count, scaled down the last few years because I want to keep my high producers fed. I like to keep my sharks fed. And we will probably scale up again as things get busier. In terms of scaling into new markets, we didn't do any of that in the last year and a half. I didn't feel like it was fair to the agents that I do have that have worked really hard for me and stuck with us through the bad market to be like, hey guys, I'm opening up a new market for you guys to compete with. I didn't feel like that was cool. So there's a couple we'll probably open up next year, but it's been fairly fluid in terms of, we've never shut an office down with the exception of the Nashville office. So when I lived there, we were doing some deals there, but Nashville's just so anti short-term rentals. On, like, again, the third client who got in a lawsuit with the city because they changed the rules on them. I was like, okay, we're not dealing with this anymore. So it is fluid, but the goal is to keep the clients happy, but B, keep the agents happy too, because I want happy agents do a better job. So that's what I like.
Yeah, and how do you think through that? And again, I remember, and I'm not an expert at all, but sometimes I see a headline. Like, I feel like Dallas had a pretty big rule change that affected your segment. Is the thought process to, and again, this kind of speaks to any niche, right? Like, being that expert who can answer intelligently and with data. But is the philosophy to go to markets that kind of have my intuitive guess would be the more regulation, the better, right? Because it's kind of like it's worked itself out versus like no rules has an opening for rule changes or rule creation.
That's very true. And we focus on, I want to make this part very clear. We focus on very mature vacation rental markets. So these are areas that the majority of the real estate since forever, before Airbnb existed, before the internet existed, has always been second homes and vacation rentals. We don't go into metro markets. We have a couple what I call vacation-ish markets that are technically like metros, but also mature vacation markets like Scottsdale or Orlando. But for the most part, like we would never open up in a place like Dallas because those types of markets that are purely metro tend to be, you run into the most problems in terms of anti-short-term rental regulation. Whereas if you're in a mature vacation market where this has been something that people do for decades, like here in the Destin area where I live, my grandmother's been coming and renting a vacation house every summer since like 1937. So those battles and that friction was fought a long time ago. So now you're very stable with the regulations and everybody kind of knows what position they're playing. It's very organized. The permitting process is, there's no friction there. So I like markets like that where the entire economy of that market is dependent on the tourism that is staying in the short-term rentals. So, you'll get a little bit like some rule changes every now and then, but you're really never going to run into a situation where they're like, okay, no more short-term rentals, because the entire economy would collapse because we don't have other industry in a lot of these markets except for tourism.
No, that's a super interesting distinction. And share about how you philosophically built out the funnel, because as I understand it, you have a best-selling book on the subject. You have a very nationally listened to podcast, and you keynote most major events. Like, are you very intentional about that funnel, and is it a mix of authority to lead flow? Like, how do you think through that?
So we have never run an ad. I experimented with Zillow leads once for about 6 months and it was trash. And I found that, sorry, I'm sure somebody from Zillow is probably going to hear this. Sorry, guys. But I found that even like lead sources that are well within our industry, like the short-term rental data companies, you can buy leads from them. None of them are as good as the ones who find us and come to us organically and understand how we work. So everything to begin with for the first 3 or 4 years before the book was just word of mouth. So that was up until 2020. And I believe we did 100 million in 2019 or 2020. I'll have to look that up. So we scaled pretty big just based on repeat clients and word of mouth referrals. And that's a big part of the way that I run our business operationally too. Like a lot of people, for example, one thing like charging the transaction fee, the transaction coordinator fee to clients, it's just $350 in some cases. And they just throw it on the Alta or the HUD and call it a day. I don't like that. I think that's gross. I don't let my agents do that because the clients, even if they don't say anything, even if they don't give you a problem, if they see that, it can cause a little bit of like a bad taste. And somebody who has a bad taste is not going to send you their friend, even if you never hear about it, even if they never say, hey, what's this charge? So for me, the client experience is very important. And I want to make them so successful that they do tell all their friends and they do come back and buy more with us, and probably in different markets. So up until the book came out, it was all just referrals, and it still mostly is. But being the first to market with how to run and invest in short-term rentals book on a real publisher. So mine's still the only one out there that's not self-published. I've got a second one coming out in February, also not self-published. So being the first to the space helps a lot. And then we were the first short-term rental specifically geared towards investors podcast also. So now we kind of switched from referral to more authority model, but that kind of mixes in with referral as well. But we don't buy any leads. We just focus on being the authority in the market, which, is getting harder to do as Airbnb investing has gotten bigger. So there's definitely a lot of right place, right time about it with the short-term shop team. So, if we'd started it 2 years earlier, it might not have hit. And if we'd started it 2 years later, somebody probably would have beat us to it. So being first has a lot to do with becoming the authority. So, I mean, my advice to other people who might want to do something similar is like find the thing where the clients come easiest to you. For me, it was investors, and it was short-term rental investors because I was doing that and I could talk to them about that very easily. But if you listen to this and say, oh, I'm going to do that too, it's not going to work like that for you. You have to find the thing that's authentic to you. Like, for example, when I was a bartender, there was a real estate agent who came in the bar every single day, had 1 or 2 drinks, chit chatted with all the regulars, and would leave. And back then she was selling $80,000 houses in East Nashville. Now all those houses are $2 million. And she's like the agent that lists things in East Nashville because she was the East Nashville, like, local hangout at the bar. Everybody knows me girl. So you have to kind of find that thing where the clients are coming easy. Like I got fired off of a $50,000 mobile home when I was still trying to sell primary homes. I'd sold like $30 million worth of investments that year. And then my friend's parents ran me all over Tennessee. I remember I was super pregnant. It was super cold. We were doing 12-hour days, 4 or 5 days. The houses would be 2-3 hours apart from each other. And I'd been looking with the mom, and then the dad came, and I didn't know where to find the, I don't know what it's called. Like, it's basically the serial number of the mobile home. Yep. And he fired me. And so I'm driving home, and I remember I stopped at KFC. Again, I was super pregnant, and got one of those big KFC bowls with the fried chicken and the mashed potatoes and the corn and everything in there. And I was like, I'm not trying to sell primary homes anymore. This is stupid. I'm getting fired over the stupidest things. I've just helped investors buy $30 million worth of investment properties. I am only doing investments from now on. And when I stop trying to like be that, call me for your buying, selling, investing, and do everything real estate agent needs, when I stopped doing that and niche down, then everything kind of took off.
I'm sure you've tried and stopped several things in the kind of vertical integration, right? So no matter what market you're in, there is a kind of a ceiling or if you were spending dollars on marketing, diminishing returns, which with your model, you don't have that, but like there's probably a capacity thing. Mm-hmm. What has worked and what hasn't worked, right? Because most successful people, it's like, I'll also tell you the 10 things not to try, like mm-hmm. mortgage, title, transaction coordination for other people. Like, what have you, I'm assuming probably you've done in property management in-house and probably changed mm-hmm. your mind. What has worked? What is the pillar of your business that would surprise people that is almost as important as the transactional business?
So we tried a title company and promptly shut that down within a year, because what I found with our model is a lot. I mean, it's happened with basically all of the real estate specific tech also, is that everything is built to do one location, one stream of clients, one location worth of agents. And our model is just so different to that. We might have one client who's working with 4 of our agents at the same time, and those 4 agents need all of the same things out of, a CRM or any number of things, but nothing is designed for a client, for a lead to have multiple agents assigned to them. Nothing. We've had success with Follow Up Boss, so shout out to them. But the title company, so I got on the vertical integration train of, okay, let's get a title company, let's get a mortgage company. And what I found with the title company is, you use one of those white label services that works with agents. And what happened was, over the course of time, like, sometimes we're going to need something at 4:45 on a Friday and it's falling apart, and it has to happen right now. It can't happen Monday because the client has a 1031 exchange deadline and they have to close today. And after a few times of them being like, oh, it's 4:45, we're out of the office, and like not being willing to do what it took to get that client closed and just trying to push it till Monday, like no big deal, I was like, guys, this is not residential. Sometimes we have got to jump in there and get things closed, because we do have a lot of clients who have to close on certain days or before certain times because of 1031 exchanges, or it has to be this calendar year, which means they have to get under contract by a certain time for tax purposes. And I found that those white label type services to open title companies and things don't work with our model either. And so that cost me, it cost me close to $1 million. So don't, I would not recommend doing that unless you're doing very, very basic, typical primary home stuff. And even then, I mean, the headache was not really worth it when we were already doing. I found if you have a big team too, this is another one, and you start trying to do the vertical integration piece, everybody, the agents already have the title companies and the lenders who they work with really well, who they enjoy working with. And then you come in with well, this is now our preferred vendor. There can be some friction. A lot of them are like, well, I don't want to have to use this lender or use this title company. We have a great relationship with these over there. It's really smooth. And, this one that you just brought in has not been smooth. I don't want to do that. Or then the vendor that you're using. So like I do have a mortgage company, and there can be friction with the mortgage company when some of the agents want to stick with the lender that they've been using that's always closed on time. It's always does a great job. And then I'm kind of like caught in the middle of, well, it's not the agent's job to get the mortgage company business. Like we would like for everyone to play nicely together, but it's the agent's job to help the client close the deal. And if somebody else is doing a better job of that, we've got to fix it over here at the mortgage company so that we're doing as good a job as that. And it can just be a big headache. The mortgage company has definitely been worth it for me. I've got a great partner who came from the short-term rental world, so she understands it. But if that had been a situation, and we've been able to work through everything because we're good partners, all that friction. But again, if you get one of those white label services in there that's not used to a different type of real estate, it can be really, really ugly.
And so has anything been interesting? Because you're kind of reinforcing something I say to people, right? I'm always surprised when like someone literally doing like 10 or 20 million bucks is like, hey, I want to get into this. I'm like, how about you just double your units or your volume? Like,
yeah, totally agree.
But have there been any synergistic ones? Like actually, like my assumption is people ask you for management, and I could make an argument as to why you probably say no, but like, how do you decide which part of owning construction or management is almost like guaranteed you're going to have some friction, right?
Mm-hmm.
and is it worth it? Is it not? Like we talked to some big teams in Hawaii who property management is essential because so many of the buyers are from the mainland, and the property management keeps them top of mind. So talk to me how you see that opportunity.
So for us, our whole thing is, and when I started my first short-term rental that I bought in the Smokies back then, 2015, the concept of self-management through Airbnb and Vrbo was still very new. And it was the standard in markets like that you use one of the big brick and mortar cabin rental companies. And they had a monopoly on everything. What?
That take half, right?
Yeah, they took 40% of your gross. And for me, when we were buying, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We need that 40% so we can go buy more property. We can't afford to pay you 40%. So we figured out how to self-manage on our own. Now it is so much easier. There's so much great automation and things to help you with that we teach all our clients how to do that. We teach our clients how to avoid having to pay somebody. Now it's more like 20, 25%. But to give you some context on how much money that actually is, I've got 8 vacation rentals in my portfolio now. If I'd paid somebody 25% last year to manage those, I would have paid somebody $250,000. So for what is essentially like a $45,000 gig. So we have not gotten into that property management space, A, because I would rather die than manage other people's properties. B, because we're kind of like, the punk rockers, the upsetters. Like we want you, I'm teaching you how to fish here so that you can be successful, so that you can quit your job, so you can add an extra stream of income to your family. So we've kind of been the anti-property management. So it just never would have made sense for us to flip on ourselves like that. So that's why we've never done it.
And then how do you think through of like where red light, green light, right? Your gross commission income outperforms entire regional independent brokerages with, hundreds of agents. And so how do you do red light, green light on how do you expand support, or, how do you contract a market, or how do you rev up a market while still making sure that you're feeding everybody? Because yes, you're a licensed agent, but you're very much just a business operator at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I keep a very, very lean team. Like I've got a group text with Kyle Whistle and Kenny and all them. And they have a lot of employees that I do not have, because I'm very worst case scenario. I'm a very anxious, high strung person. So even in at the height of things, I'm like, guys, this is not going to last forever. This isn't going to last forever. So I always keep my team as lean as possible. And I find ways to pull their compensation from transactions rather than put it on the shop to have like salaries. So I keep it lean so that I can be flexible, and which has really been helpful the last 2 years with the real estate market being dead, that I haven't been saddled with a whole bunch of, with a whole bunch of overhead, so that we don't have to do a whole lot of expanding and contracting. Now, on the other side of that, when you're pulling percentages out of deals to pay people and it's an up market, then it starts to not make sense. It starts to, you start to wish you had them on a lower salary instead of paying them per deal. But when you pay them per deal, it helps with and there was a lot of overwhelm in 2021 and 22. I was having to jump in and help do assistant work on our agents' deals because everybody was dying on their keyboards. Everybody was so busy. But when you're paying people per deal, it incentivizes them to keep working hard and not just like, well, I'm only making $50,000, so I'm not going to do this extra work. So it keeps people motivated. But I like to keep things super lean. I still, we sell an average of 1,000 houses per year. And I still think, well, what would happen if I never sold another house? Which doesn't happen. Once you build a huge business, it doesn't just turn off. But I still think about that, and I run my business that way. Every marketing dollar, I'll say this: when it comes to vendors, marketing, things like that, I am slow to hire, quick to fire, because it really has to make a lot of sense for me to do it. If it even half doesn't make sense, like if I'm like, I don't know about this lead source, it's I don't know about this. Somebody's vibe, even if somebody's vibe is off, I'm like, we're done with that. We're moving on. And it can seem kind of black and white and maybe a little too much at times. And I'm like, no, we're done with that person. They're dead to me. It works, just keep the family small and keep the team lean.
And going into, you just maneuvered, again, context is everything, right? 2021, 2022, you and everybody else crushed it. 7 million homes sold in the United States to 3.8 million, right? Like, I don't think most people have that awareness. It was like almost 50% drop in transactional volume, which I think disproportionately affected your business model even more because it was a massive run up in rate.
Right.
Like, what are the kind of last wrapping it up, what are the ahas? Because I'm sure that was not fun to manage. And then based off that aha, how are you looking at 25 and 26 and 27?
Yeah. So I was I don't want to say I felt very justified over the last 2 years from running a lean team, that, okay, we're still able to keep everybody fed. We're still actually doing really well compared to most teams. I think we're ranked 3rd at EXP right now. And because Kyle bought a team, and that's cheating, but whatever. So, I'm running 2. So, I've felt really good about being conservative. I think a super conservative manager. So that has served me well, and that we were still able to produce. I think we're going to end up right around 500 million for this year. And I think we're going to slowly tick back up. I think that a good, not super low, not height of the market year for us is around 750 million. So I think we're going to slowly tick back up to that, where I don't think we'll hit that in 2025. But I think I would never say anything political. I don't care about anybody's politics. I don't care about my own politics. I love everybody. I don't give a shit about that. But I do think that now that this big election is over, everybody's kind of settling into, what's going to be done. I think that we're going to see. It really depends more. What investors do depends more on what the media is talking about than what's actually happening. So back in September, rates went down a little bit and then they went up some. And I think we're going to have December will be a pretty high month, probably the highest month of the whole year for us this year. And rates are not any lower than they were. All that's changed is the media rhetoric of, oh, the Fed's reducing rates. It hasn't affected the mortgage rates. Mortgage rates actually went up. And now we know who the president is going to be. So people are like, okay, well, now I know what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and buy stuff. I've got my strategy set up. And then there's the, whatever anybody in politics is saying about what they're going to do for the housing market. I do think that something's going to have to change, because the entire country cannot buy a house right now, not just investors. So as something is done for rates to come down, I don't know what that's going to be. I think we're going to tick back up. But anyway, all that to say, I'm getting off track here. Our investor clients, it really depends more on what the media rhetoric is. If the rhetoric is economic easing is happening, then they start buying things, even if the mortgage rates are not lower. And so I think we're going to start seeing, as the Fed, even though it has not affected mortgage rates yet, Fed eases, we're getting further away from the election and the uncertainty there. I think that people are just going to kind of pick back up and keep going and keep buying. So I think we're going to slowly tick back up to that 750 million range, but I think it'll be 2026 before we get there.
And last one, I'm sure that you work with a lot of agents who send you referrals who want to have their clients take an opportunity. What would be the best way for our agents to reach out to you? And if they got somebody who needs to buy a short-term rental and they want to send it to you so they know they're well taken care of?
Yeah. So you can reach out to us at theshorttermshop.com or on Instagram at theshorttermshop. And we are expanding. I'm going to take this opportunity to plug, since you've got a bunch of real estate agents listening. We need to hire in Myrtle Beach, the Poconos in Pennsylvania, and probably need another one in the Smokies right now. Or if you're in any vacation rental market that sounds like it would be a good fit for the shop, reach out to us, because we'll hire you.
Awesome. Well, Avery, always a pleasure. I've been wanting to do this because, again, number one in the world for us more than once, but it's the process, right? It's how do you go from 0 to 1, then 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and 750 million. So always a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Yeah, see you then. Thank you.